everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps. Today I'm going to show you how to separate the sleeves for the Simply Sweet Raglan baby sweater so that we can continue to knit the body. The goal at this point is going to be to get the front and back stitches onto our needle and to take off all the stitches for the sleeves onto separate holders or waste yarn. Now we could use a stitch holder like this, but I don't like this because it is so rigid and we've got a curved piece over here, so I find that this stretches it a bit and gets it all wonky. If I was making something flat, this would be great, but when I'm dealing with curved shapes, I prefer not to use that. If you have a extra cord for your knitting needles, if you're using interchangeable needles, you can definitely store it on a cord with a stopper, and that's easy. You can put a needle tip on here and use that to transfer it, and then just put stoppers on the end. So that's a great way to store the stitches if you have an extra one. But what I'm going to do, which requires no fancy equipment, is to actually just store it on a piece of contrasting waste yarn. And you want to use a yarn that's similar in thickness to the yarn you're working with, or even slightly bigger. This is a cotton yarn, so it should come out smoothly when I go to pull it out. So let's see how it works. I'm at the center of the back. Remember, that's where we started our round, at the center back. So I'm going to go ahead and knit until I get to the first marker, because remember, we want all of the stitches from the back and the front to be on our needles still. So I'm just knitting across until I get to the first marker. Okay, I've made it to the first marker, and we don't need the markers anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Now these stitches were for the back, but these stitches are going to be for one of the sleeves, right up until I get to the next marker. So I want to get rid of those, put them away for right now. So if I'm using a stitch holder like this, you open it up, it's basically like a big safety pin, and you can transfer the stitches onto it like that. If you're using a needle attached to a separate cord like this, then you can just slip the stitches like as though you were just slipping them if you're knitting. But since I'm using waste yarn, I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle, and I've just got a regular old yarn needle that I am threading with some waste yarn. If I can find the end. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and thread this needle with the waste yarn. And I'm just going to pretend this is like a knitting needle, and I'm going to slip the stitches, and I'm doing it purl-wise so they're all in the same direction. You don't want to go this way one time and that way another time. Just slip them all this way. It should line up. You can slip bunches of them at once, as many as you can fit on your needle, like that, and just pull the yarn through and slide these off of your knitting needle. Okay, try not to split any of the stitches and keep the tension nice and even, but you can fix all of that when you pick these stitches up again later. So I just keep going until I get to the next marker, which is right there. Okay, and again, I don't need those markers anymore, so I'm taking that off. And all of my sleeve stitches are now on this waste piece of yarn. Pull that tail through, long end, there we go. So all my stitches are now on this waste piece of yarn. And when I want them later, I can put them back on a needle and then just pull out this yarn. For right now, to keep them nice and safe, I'm going to just tie a little bow. So I need to cut this because it's very, very long. And this is where, if this was rigid, it would always have to be like that, and then working around it gets to be kind of a pain, right? But when it is, and that's why I don't like this for the sleeves. When it's on this waste yarn, it's flexible, and you can work around it without, like, it won't get in your way. So I'm just going to tie a little bow. Maybe I'll double knot it just to be safe, because I really don't want this coming out. We don't want to lose those stitches. There we go. And trim off if you've got any extra, you can trim it off so it doesn't get in your way. sometimes what I like to do if it starts to get in my way is I'll take a locking stitch marker like this one, and I'll actually take the ends of the bow and just attach them somewhere up here so that nothing dangles and gets in my way later. It's not absolutely necessary, but if the yarns are getting in your way, then you can definitely pull them out of the way like that. And then that should be completely out of your way. And that is your sleeve cap that's just held completely separately like that. So I've got the first half of the back done. We have the sleeve stitches off on a separate yarn, and then the next section is the front. But to go under the arm, I want to add just a few stitches. For this size, I'm adding 4 stitches. So the way I'm going to do that, I want a very low profile cast on for these 4 stitches because you're going to feel that at the underarm seam. And if you have a very low profile cast on, it'll be nearly seamless. So I'm going to do just this backwards loop or twisted loop or E cast on, whatever you call it, where you just make a loop. So you loop it around your thumb and slide it onto the needle. You can turn your work around and do a knitted cast on if you want. However you want to cast on, just cast on 4 stitches, but try to do something that's as low profile as possible. So later when I pick up stitches here, you won't even notice that those were cast on. You won't even feel a seam. And now I've got my underarm stitches, so now I go on to the front, and I've kept them very nice and loose. If there's any bagginess, it can be fixed when you weave in ends, so err on the side of looser rather than tighter. So now these are the front stitches, and I definitely want to knit those because I want those to stay on my needle. So there's my front stitches, and I'm going to knit all the way across to the next marker. Okay, I've knit the last stitch before my marker, so that's the front. Now I get rid of the marker, and once again, notice how I'm pulling that needle out? That's just so I don't drop the stitches while I'm fiddling with the sleeves. But now I'm going to thread my needle again, my yarn needle, and take off the stitches for the second sleeve. So same thing as before, I'm just slipping the stitches. You can do a few at a time, you could do the whole needle's worth at a time, whatever you're comfortable with. I like to do 2 or 3 at a time and no more than that, because otherwise I feel like I'm stretching things. But and you just keep going till you get to the next marker. So there we go, I'm at the next marker. I can drop this marker, tie off this yarn to hold the sleeve stitches. Trim off my loose ends. If I wanted to, I could tack up those bows to hold them in place. I'm going to double knot just so I'm safe and secure. And then I still, remember, here's the beginning of my round. It was in the middle of the back, right? So I still need to get across to that spot again. And one more time, I'm going to need to cast on stitches to get under the arm here. So I'm going to do that E cast on or backwards loop cast on or twisted loop cast on. It's got so many names, where you wrap the loop around your thumb and just cast on the stitch. So it's making a loop that twists. You see that? You're basically making a twisty loop like that and putting it on your needle. Be sure to keep it nice and loose. And I've got my 4 stitches for this size. The other sizes may have a different number of stitches. It'll say it in the pattern. And I'm going to go ahead and knit continental for this part. I've been switching back and forth. I like to switch back and forth between knitting continental and English because I find that it gives your hands a rest. If one way stresses your hands in one spot, the other way will stress it in another spot. So you can switch back and forth and your hands will be more comfortable for longer periods of knitting. Okay, so I'm at the end of the row, and I don't want to lose this marker. One of the things I do if I want to end at the stitch marker, but I don't want to lose the marker, is I will actually go ahead and slip the next couple of stitches just to hold everything in place. And then when I'm ready to knit, I'll slip those back again and start knitting like normal. But this is now, get everything stood up for you. Now it looks a little bit more like a sweater, right? You've got the sleeves pulled off to the side here, and then you've got the front and the back on your needles. So that's how you separate the sleeves for the Simply Sweet Raglan baby sweater. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.